there is a very specific, heavy realization that sometimes hits you the moment you open your eyes in the morning. It is not just the physical fatigue of starting another day, but the profound, crushing awareness that you are running a race where the starting line was never drawn straight. You look at the world around you and see people who seem to effortlessly glide forward, propelled by invisible advantages. They have a financial cushion, a supportive network, a prestigious education, or a pristine environment that opens doors before they even have to knock. Meanwhile, you find yourself clawing through the dirt, exhausting your vital energy just to reach the baseline that others were simply handed at birth. The raw, uncomfortable truth hits you like a physical blow. You are starting life 1-0 behind. We must confront the deepest, most unsettling reality of human existence, which is the undeniable fact of our own sudden appearance in this world. You did not choose the family you were born into. You did not select your socioeconomic status, your geographic location, your genetic predispositions, or the traumas that were inflicted upon you when you were too young to defend yourself. You were simply thrown into a complex, chaotic universe without your consent. You were dropped onto a stage where the play was already in motion, handed a script you never wrote, and told to survive. This feeling of being thrust into a rigged game is the source of an immense, silent anger that burns in the hearts of millions. It is the agonizing recognition that life is not a clean, balanced equation. From the time we are children, society feeds us a comforting but devastating illusion. We are taught the myth of absolute fairness, the idea that the world is a meritocracy, where good deeds are immediately rewarded and hard work universally pays off. But as you step out into the cold reality of adulthood, this illusion shatters. You quickly discover that your margins for error are terrifyingly thin. A single financial mistake or a stroke of bad luck could ruin you, while others can fail repeatedly, caught by the soft safety nets of their privilege. It is entirely natural to feel a deep, burning resentment when you recognize this asymmetry. You ask the universe why your path has to be littered with thorns while others walk on paved roads. But right at the edge of this completely justified anger lies the most dangerous psychological trap a human being can ever fall into. The realization that the world is unfair is the exact moment the victim mentality opens its doors and invites you inside. Playing the victim is incredibly seductive because it is deeply comforting. It provides an immediate, ironclad alibi for any lack of progress in your life. If the game is entirely rigged, if the cards were dealt from the bottom of the deck, then you are completely absolved of the terrifying responsibility of trying to win. Blaming your parents, your lack of money, the economy, or your bad luck momentarily lifts the heavy burden of expectation off your shoulders. It feels like a relief, but it is the relief of a narcotic. It temporarily masks your current struggles while slowly and silently destroying your future. When you internalize the belief that you are a helpless prisoner of your circumstances, you surrender your ultimate human sovereignty. You hand the keys to your destiny over to the very world that you believe has wronged you, sitting paralyzed as your precious time on earth evaporates. To reclaim your life and forge a destiny of undeniable greatness, you must fiercely reject the comfort of the victim narrative. You must understand a fundamental law of nature. You cannot control the wind, the weather, or the turbulent sea, but you possess absolute, unquestionable authority over the sails of your own ship. The circumstances of your birth and the hardships of your past are external facts. They are entirely outside of your jurisdiction. What belongs to you, what no tyrant, no economic collapse, and no unfair advantage can ever take away, is your reasoned choice in how you respond. True power is born in the quiet, unshakable realization that while you did not choose the heavy burden placed upon your back, you alone dictate how you will carry it. You stop demanding a fair fight, and you begin to study the battlefield exactly as it is. This shift in perspective does not mean you deny the pain of your past or pretend that your disadvantages do not exist. Instead, it requires a radical psychological alchemy. You must take the raw, jagged, unfair materials of your life and consciously choose to view them not as a curse, but as the ultimate, customized training ground for your character. Think of the people who are handed an easy, frictionless existence because they never have to fight for their survival, because they never have to navigate the abyss of failure or rejection. They remain fragile. They lack the dense, calloused psychological armor required to withstand the inevitable tragedies of human life. But you, starting from behind, are being subjected to a relentless resistance. Every lack of resource, every closed door, and every moment of profound adversity is forcing you to develop a terrifying resilience. Your disadvantages are secretly building a level of grit, resourcefulness, and hunger that privilege can never purchase. To truly become unstoppable, you must take this a step further and learn to fiercely love the very circumstances you once cursed. You must look at the chaotic, unfair, unchosen reality of your life and embrace it with a passionate aggression. You must declare that you would not want it any other way, because an easier path would have forged a weaker version of yourself. By completely accepting your fate, including all of its dark and painful corners, you neutralize its ability to harm you. You stop wasting your precious psychic energy wishing for a different past, and you pour every ounce of your vitality into dominating the present moment. You take the things you cannot control, and you turn them into the very weapons you will use to conquer your future. You realize that your unique struggle is the precise ingredient required to build your unique greatness. To achieve this profound psychological alchemy, you must embrace a concept that terrifies the ordinary mind: radical responsibility. Radical responsibility is the absolute, unflinching acceptance that while you are not to blame for the hand you were dealt, you are entirely, undeniably responsible for how you play it. There is a deep, seductive comfort in waiting for an apology from the universe. We secretly hope that if we suffer visibly enough, if we complain loudly enough, someone will eventually step in to balance the scales and hand us the resources we were denied. But the universe is utterly indifferent to our sense of entitlement. No savior is coming to retroactively fix your childhood, to deposit funds into your bank account, or to erase the unfair advantages of your peers. Every second you spend dwelling in the resentment of what should have been is dead time, a tragic squandering of the only life you have. True character, the very foundation of unbreakable self-respect, begins the exact moment you stop demanding fairness and start taking ownership of your existence. When you assume this level of radical responsibility, you undergo a massive shift in your internal architecture. You stop viewing your unchosen circumstances as a prison and begin to see them as a highly specific, customized training ground. Think of the ancient philosophical metaphor of a dog tied to a moving cart. If the dog resists the direction of the cart, it will be dragged across the stones, exhausted and broken, yet it will still end up exactly where the cart is going. If, however, the dog chooses to run alongside the cart, it retains its agency, its dignity, and its freedom within those constraints. We are all bound to the cart of our unchosen fate. We did not pick the era, the economy, or the family we were born into. If we fight these unalterable facts, we are dragged painfully through life, exhausted by our own futile resistance. But if we embrace them, if we run with them, we reclaim our sovereign power. We transition from a state of bitter resignation to a state of active, formidable participation. This is the essence of truly loving your fate. You do not merely tolerate the disadvantages you were handed, you actively embrace them as the raw material of your future greatness. You look at the heavy, jagged burdens placed upon your shoulders, and you realize that a supreme trainer is matching you with a formidable sparring partner. You cannot become a champion without breaking a sweat, without enduring the fierce friction of heavy resistance. Individuals who are handed a life of uninterrupted comfort and endless luxury are secretly cursed. Unbruised prosperity is weak and easy to defeat. Because they have never had to struggle, they never develop the calloused skin of suffering, the deep, dense psychological armor required to endure the inevitable tragedies of human existence. When the storms of life eventually hit, their fragile egos shatter. But you, having started from behind, have been secretly gifted the ultimate advantage. Every door that was slammed in your face, every lack of resource, and every agonizing setback has functioned as a heavy weight in the gymnasium of your soul, building a level of grit and adaptability that no amount of money can ever buy. This is the exact moment your disadvantages are forged into unique, undeniable weapons. When you lack financial capital, you are forced to cultivate an extreme, relentless resourcefulness. Because you cannot simply buy your way out of a problem, you must invent a way out, developing a creative genius and a hustle that the privileged never have to access. When you lack a powerful social network or a supportive family, you learn the art of supreme self-reliance, realizing that your own mind and your own two hands are the only true security you possess in this world. The impediment to your action ceases to be a barrier. The obstacle actually becomes the way. You learn to take every piece of negative energy, every rejection, and every doubt hurled at you by society, and feed it into a blazing internal furnace. You stop wishing for a lighter load and start demanding broader shoulders. As this radical responsibility takes root within your mind, a profound silence replaces the frantic noise of envy and comparison. You no longer look at the person who started 10 steps ahead of you with bitterness. You realize that their path has absolutely nothing to do with yours, and that the victories they achieve effortlessly will never carry the same weight, depth, or meaning as the territory you have to conquer, step by grueling step. Your journey is uniquely yours, and the scars you accumulate along the way are not signs of victimization. They are the battle wounds of a warrior who refused to be defined by their starting position. You begin to trust yourself with an absolute certainty because you know that you have been tested by the fire and you did not burn. You have taken the worst life could throw at you, the most unfair and unyielding circumstances, and you have slowly, methodically bent them into a masterpiece of your own design. To translate this profound philosophical understanding into actual, undeniable momentum, you must move from the realm of theory into the theater of action. It is not enough to simply understand that your disadvantages are a training ground. You must actively engage with the equipment. This begins the very moment you put this device down, with a fundamental restructuring of how you process the events of your daily life. Every single time you encounter a barrier, a rejection, or a harsh reminder of your lack of initial advantage, you must ruthlessly slice that event in half. On one side is the external circumstance, the lack of funding, the closed door, the unfairness of the situation. This side belongs to the chaotic world, and you must immediately and entirely discard it from your emotional register. On the other side is your internal response, your reasoned choice, your capacity to act with dignity and resourcefulness. This side belongs exclusively to you. By refusing to bleed your precious psychic energy into the void of things you cannot control, you instantly weaponize that energy, redirecting it entirely into the execution of your next deliberate move. You must fundamentally alter your relationship with the concept of an obstacle. For the rest of your life, when a path is blocked or a plan is thwarted by circumstances beyond your control, you will no longer view it as a tragic misfortune. You will view it as a necessary redirection. The very things that impede your progress are, in fact, advancing your progress by forcing you to become more adaptable, more cunning, and more resilient. The obstacle on the path literally becomes the path itself. If the establishment denies you a seat at their table, the obstacle forces you to build your own table, granting you ownership instead of mere participation. If you lack the capital to overpower a problem, the obstacle forces you to outthink the problem, cultivating a level of creative genius that endless resources would have kept dormant. You learn to take the toxic, unfair materials of your reality, digest them, and turn them into the pure fuel of your own ambition. You become a psychological alchemist, transforming the lead of your unchosen circumstances into the gold of your own character. Closing the massive gap between where you started and where you intend to finish cannot be achieved through grand, sweeping gestures or desperate, panicked leaps. It must be achieved through the quiet, unglamorous power of relentless microscopic execution. You must build your empire brick by boring brick. When you look at the mountain ahead of you, the ego wants to panic at the distance left to travel. You must silence that ego and shrink your focus down entirely to the immediate square foot of earth beneath your boots. You pour all of your intensity, all of your intelligence, and all of your aggression into executing the single task right in front of you with absolute terrifying perfection. You do not complain about the weight of the work. You do not look over your shoulder to see if the privileged are moving faster or if the crowd is applauding your effort. You simply put your head down and perform the duties of a formidable human being. The individuals who started ahead of you are often coasting on the momentum of their inheritance, but you are generating your own unstoppable momentum day by day, hour by hour, until your sheer force of will completely eclipses their head start. In this grueling pursuit, you will inevitably face periods where you feel stuck, where your lack of initial resources traps you in environments you despise, whether it is a dead-end job, a toxic neighborhood, or a state of financial gridlock. In these valleys of perceived delay, you face a critical choice regarding the nature of your time. You can treat this period as dead time, sitting passively, paralyzed by resentment, waiting for the universe to finally hand you an opportunity. Or you can choose to make it a live time. You can aggressively utilize every second of your confinement to sharpen your sword. You read, you study the greats who came before you, you observe the mistakes of others, and you build the invisible infrastructure of your future success without the distracting glare of the spotlight. You do not view your waiting period as a punishment, but as a profound, necessary phase of incubation. By making this choice, you actively strip your past of its power to make you a victim, and you forge the specific weapons you will use to conquer your future. As you embark on this path, you must also construct an impenetrable sanctuary within your own mind, an inner citadel that cannot be breached by the chaotic, unfair realities of the outside world. When the familiar sting of envy arises, or when society attempts to remind you of your supposedly lower station, you must retreat into this fortress. You remind yourself that you are running a completely different race, governed by an entirely internal scorecard. You do not measure your success by the superficial metrics of the crowd, by the titles on a door, or by the digits in a bank account. You measure your success by the staggering distance you have traveled from your starting line, and by the dense, unbreakable density of the character you have built along the way. You realize that possessing the superficial trappings of success without the internal foundation of character is a fragile, terrifying existence. You trade the exhausting performance of appearing successful for the quiet, unshakable confidence of actually becoming masterful. This path requires a courage that borders on the irrational. You must be willing to endure the heavy friction of growth, the lonely nights of absolute uncertainty, and the exhausting reality that you will have to work twice as hard for half the initial recognition. But you endure it because you know that you are not just fighting for your own elevation, you are fighting to break a generational chain. You are the vanguard. You are taking the heavy, concentrated fire of life's unfairness so that your children and those who look up to you can walk a slightly easier road. This profound, selfless purpose becomes the endless reservoir of energy that keeps you advancing when your personal motivation runs dry. You recognize that true, enduring greatness is never born in the sterile environment of comfort. It is forged in the blazing furnace of difficulty, in the agonizing hours of pushing against the resistance of a world that did not want you to win. You learn to greet every dawn not with a heavy sigh, but with the fierce joy of a gladiator stepping into the arena, eager to test the limits of their own endurance. The individuals who were handed the world on a silver platter will never know the profound, quiet power that you are cultivating right now. When the inevitable storms of life finally reach them, when the markets collapse, when tragedy strikes, when the artificial safety nets of their privilege are violently removed, they will panic. They will freeze because their nervous systems have never been trained to operate in the terrifying dark. You will stand firm, anchored deeply in the reality that you have survived much worse, that you were literally built in the dark, and that you know exactly how to navigate the abyss. The very disadvantages that were supposed to destroy you were the heavy weights that built your absolute invincibility. You will look at the chaos. You will smile a cold, knowing smile, and you will get to work. This is the ultimate victory of the human spirit. It is not about proving the world wrong, and it is certainly not about seeking revenge against those who had an easier path. It is about reaching a state of absolute, unshakable self-mastery. It is about looking at the beautiful, chaotic, deeply unfair trajectory of your life and realizing that you used every single jagged piece of it to build a masterpiece. You took the absolute worst that fate had to offer, and you transformed it into unyielding, undeniable power. You no longer wish for a fair fight, and you no longer mourn the illusions of your childhood. You welcome the rigged game, because you know with absolute certainty that you are the most dangerous, resourceful, and resilient player at the table. Your unchosen circumstances never had the power to define you. They only ever had the power to reveal you. You may have been forced to start your life 1-0 behind, but because of the fire you walked through and the mind you forged, you are going to finish it as an absolute legend.